us. And as if by magic, there it is. And we will be pausing along the way to give you an opportunity to ask questions in the chat. And as I said, Becky will be fielding them to Emma so that we make sure that we get your questions and queries answered. We're expecting this session to go for about an hour, but after 45 minutes, hopefully the content will mostly be done so that we can then focus on a little bit of a demonstration of the platform and some final questions that you might have. So without further ado, Emma, over to you.
Oh, hello and good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. And thank you for joining us on this magical mystery tour of phonics. Phonics is one of those subjects which sounds really quite confusing and there's quite a lot to it. But we were really keen to be able to share with you that, you know, we're not expecting for you as readers with your young people on this platform to be experts in phonics. We wanted today to be a real taster session. If you've got your own children or, you know, when you're reading with your children on the platform, having a basic understanding of phonics is useful. It's not the most important thing. So don't think, you know, I'm an expert in this. I do this every day. I work with schools who work very hard on it day to day. And, you know, lots and lots of children in year 1 and year 2 are doing phonics day in, day out. So it's not your role to be a phonics teacher. We're not expecting that of you, but we wanted to give you the opportunity because phonics is quite, you know, it feels a bit complicated. It feels like there's lots of jargon involved in it. If you've got your own children and they might be coming home from school using all kinds of crazy words and you're like, what on earth does that mean? They seem to know an awful lot of technical vocabulary that as parents often we don't know. So really what we wanted to do today was to give you this like kind of an overview of what phonics is, what the expectations are for children year 1 and year 2, how phonics is designed to help children to read words, and then all the bits that people find a bit overwhelming about it, like how we say the sounds, the pronunciation, the attached terminology, what blending is and what purpose that means and how that helps children to be able to read words and sentences. And then we're going to, as Emma said, have a little look about how all of that can relate to your work on the platform. So we're going to do a chunk of information, then there'll be time for you to, we'll respond to some questions, then we'll give you a bit more time to listen to a bit more information. We'll have some more questions, then we'll look at the platform. So for your children to be able to learn to read, they need to be able to do 2 things. They need to be able to read the words on the page, and they need to be able to understand the words on the page. And what we try to do in schools now is to discourage that idea of guessing, because what we want is our children to become fluent readers. Because if you're not very fluent in your reading, you're not going to be able to work out what so much of your brain is going to be working out what the words say. You know, some of your brain you've not got enough of your brain to working out what the words mean. So we need our children to be fluent so that they can just read words, a bit in the same way that, you know, you probably got up this morning and you brush your teeth and you didn't think about it. You read things all the time and you don't necessarily consider it to be the act of reading. You know, if you put a ready meal in the microwave, you're reading the instructions, you're not even thinking about it. That's what we want children to become in the end. We want them to be immersed in the reading that they participate in. And within that, they've got to be fluent readers. There was a document that came out. The Department for Education recognises this as an importance. And also officers inspectors are looking out for this too. They recognise that automaticity, which is the buzzword at the minute in schools, is key. That as the children gain fluency, they start to feel like readers. So they become more motivated. And you know what it's like, if you feel like you're good at something, you want to do more of it. And you practice more. Fluent decoding, which is what reading, allows us to understand what we read. Accuracy as well as speed influences fluency. So we want them to read quickly, but we also want them to read accurately and just not to guess. And I just thought I'd give you this bit of a picture. This is exactly what it feels like. If you're an early reader, This is where phonics can be quite powerful for some of our young children. So if I was to show that to you and say, oh, right, okay, go ahead, read that for me, you would all be saying things in the chat like, who is this woman? She's crazy. She's asking us to be able to read something that, you know, there's no way we're going to be able to read there, because I haven't told you what the code is yet. I haven't told you anything about it. Because you're a reader, though, you'll be assuming that this goes from left to right. So that's the stage that your readers that you're supporting on the platform will have to go through. You can see that there are gaps between those words. So you will associate wherever there's a gap, wherever there's a unit of code or squiggles, you'll associate that as being one word. You also know that possibly at the end of a piece of text, maybe a sentence, there'll be some punctuation. So perhaps one of those symbols is going to be punctuation. You are already coming to this exercise with that kind of knowledge because you are a reader. You also might be looking at shapes and thinking, well, you know, that shape is the same as that shape. So is that the same letter? Now, when you're at this stage, imagine how overwhelming it is. This is where children, when they have a book and they can't read any of the code, they haven't got any of the phonics element, this is where it can feel very overwhelming to them. And they start to make guesses because, you know, they've got the picture. Usually children's books have lots of lovely pictures, and a lot of the books on the platform, well, they all have lovely pictures, don't they? So, you know, if we've not got any of the code, then that makes it, you know, we're just going to be guessing, really. And then gradually what happens is all schools have a phonics program, and all schools have different phonics programs. And they introduce these letter sound correspondences, the parts of the code, gradually over time. And as the children learn more, they start to be able to decipher the code more. So if I just added that letter O in there, again, it's not going to make it that much better. It starts, there's maybe bits that you can work out. So you could look at that first word. And again, because you're a reader, you know that 2-letter words at the beginning of a sentence, ending in O. It could be to, go, no, do. It could be any of those. But again, it's leaving an awful lot to chance. If I introduce the vowels, it makes it a lot easier. So all phonics programs introduce the vowels quite quickly because all words have vowels. So I've just added A, E, I, O, U in there. And straight away now you can start to work out what it feels like as a reader. You can start to see, well, I've got an O and U there. I know as a reader that probably says ow, most commonly it does. So that's ow and that's ow, and there's a shape there at the end. So could it be hour or could it be out? Or hour something, maybe it's a 2-syllable word. What could that be? I've got a 3-letter word in the middle of the sentence beginning with A. Maybe it's going to be and, because that's quite common. But other than that, again, you're going to be making guesses based on the fact that you are already a reader and you already have a really good command of English because you're an adult and you understand how this works. Children aren't in that position. This is why when your teachers assign the books on the platform, they're very mindful of the letter sound correspondences or the sounds that the children know, because if they present a child to you to read with them and they've not got all of these letter sound correspondences, reading this is going to be pretty much a guessing game. If I just add in an S and a T, which are the most common consonants in English, again, it's making it a lot easier to read, but we still can't fully read it because we haven't got all of those letter sound correspondences. And there's a sentence, go outside and put the bin out. Very timely for a Monday morning, I feel. And, you know, assuming you've got all of the code, it makes it really, really easy. And that's what phonics is teaching you this knowledge of the alphabetic code. It's helping you to be able to demystify letters as shapes matched to spoken sounds, and then be able to push them together to be able to read them in a process called blending. And also in schools, they do a process called segmenting, which is where we pull words apart to be able to spell them. We'll come on to that just shortly. So what we're going to do is break this down for you to make it really, really simple. Remember, we're not expecting you to know all of this stuff, but it can be really, really helpful to kind of understand the background. So like I said, when we're introducing letter sound correspondence, this is the most the most common thing is to recognize that this is the letter and this is the sound it makes, or this is the letter and this is the group of sounds. Technically, that's called a grapheme-phoneme correspondence, which sounds really, really technical. But basically, it's the correlation between the sound, the match of the spoken sound with the written letter. So, for example, this is an F. So this is the grapheme. This is the written representation, F. And the associated sound or the associated phoneme is F. So this is an F and it makes a sound F. It starts off really easy. So a lot of the alphabet can be tackled just in that way, nice and easy. And that's where children at the moment in reception classes are, you know, they're well on their way to that journey. The next thing that children need to remember is that there are these things called digraphs, and that's where you get two letters making one sound. And in English, there's quite a lot of those too. So we have got in that word train, we've got an A and an I making an A sound. That's a really common digraph. Well, we've got those two letters. Whenever you see A on its own, it makes the sound A. When you see it always with an I, it's going to make the sound A. So in this word, the sounds that the letter sound correspondences or the grapheme phoneme correspondences that we can see is T, R, A, N, train. Here's another one, really common one. So A and R making an R sound. So children have to, you know, it's really tricky for them because they would learn that this is an A and makes the sound A. This is an R and it makes the sound R. And then quite quickly, they have to also learn that whenever you see them together, they make a completely different sound. And that's how these digraphs work. So, you know, to be able to see these units of sounds in words can be quite tricky. So it's likely that you might have some early readers on the platform where they might read the word, I don't know, star, star, because they're still at that stage of knowing they've got a really solid understanding of the letter sound correspondences, A making an A and R making an but they perhaps haven't learned fully that an A and an R can make an R in that digraph. Here's another digraph, so O and W. Now, this one makes the sound ow most commonly, but we know that it also makes the sound O, like in blow or snow. So as well as learning these digraphs, and this is where, you know, we can start to think, gosh, how did any of us learn to read? This is where we can start to really think about, well, you know, we've learned it one way, but also we can also pronounce it in another way as well. Remember, we're not expecting you to be experts in that, but it can be really helpful for you to be able to see that sometimes children are going to make these errors when they're reading with you. So they might read the word snow as ow, because they've already learned the O and W digraph as one way, and they're trying to apply that basic knowledge in a slightly different way. So these are possible things that children might find hard, and all you've got to be able to do is say, oh no, actually this digraph can make a different sound. Sometimes schools use this language with the children. So more commonly nowadays, children follow phonics programs, and all schools have a different phonics program, and they will have different ways of describing this to the children. So the point over here is for us not to say, well, you've got to learn the way that the school talks to the children, the language. They'll probably know that. They do a lot of this all the time. If you're interested in this, you can always talk to, you know, we can talk to Emma in a minute about this, but I'm sure you can talk to your teacher that's assigned the children, and they might be able to give you a steer as to what kind of approach the school uses. But, you know, you don't need to know this particularly, other than that these might be things that the children come up against when they're reading with you. So there's single letter sound correspondences, grapheme phoneme correspondences. There's digraphs where there's two letters making one sound, and there's also these things called trigraphs where there's three letters making one sound. So commonly, the most common one, IGH, making the I sound in flight. So again, you might get children that say flight, because they've perhaps not learned it as a unit of sound yet. And really all we would say is that, you know, the children need to go through a process of overlearning it as a unit. That, you know, that could really help them. So here we've got EAR that we know as ear. That's that's a sound. So that's a trigraph that the children have to learn. And on this here, you can see these would be roughly the expectations that children would need to know by the end of reception. We would expect in all primary schools now, the expectation is that they would know the majority of these letter sound correspondences. Again, the expectation might differ from school to school because a lot of these phonics programs have slightly different approaches, but it's when you look at it, you start to think, gosh, this looks really quite hard. These are the letter sound correspondences that you will find in the pink, magenta, the red and the yellow books. So if you're reading with somebody on the platform in any of those colour band books, then it's likely that these are the letter sound correspondences or the grapheme phoneme correspondences that they will be learning in school. And you can see that there's a mix there. On the first line, there's lots of letter sound correspondences that are single letter sound correspondences, but there are also some digraphs where it's just two letters, like double F, like in puff or fluff, or double S, like in kiss and miss. Also, we might have ear in here, or air, like in chair. So I'm going to, this is the other part that makes phonics so tricky. So as well as the whole idea of being able to get your head around the terminology, we've got to be able to say these letter sound correspondences correctly too. I believe there's guidance on the platform for that too. You can ask some more questions around that. Also, for parents, when I work with parents and families in schools, we talk about using the CBeebies program alpha blocks, because that's really, really handy for watching with your children as a good model of how to say these letter sound correspondences. So both of those would work really, really well. And all phonics programs, even though they might have little mantras or little ways to help children to be able to remember them, all of them will be teaching the children to say the letter sound correspondences correctly. So this is just something, you know, don't expect that your children won't know any of these. They definitely will know at least some of these. It's just quite handy for you to know. So we'll have a little bit of a go. I'm going to say them. If you're in a space where you want to say them, my turn, your turn, you can do. If you're in a workspace where that's not a good idea, then maybe don't. What I would suggest to think about here is to think about if there's any that you are not quite sure about. So I'll give you an example. For me, in my head, because of how I learned to read myself, but also when I started teaching, this was very much the way also. I would look at a letter W and call it a W, or I might look at a C and call it a curly cur. All of those two examples there, they've kind of got an on the end of the letter, so cur and were. There's kind of an there, which is, it's got a technical name called a schwa. What we do is we take that off of the letter sound correspondences now. So we try and say these letter sounds differently. We take that away, because not only does it impact on the reading, but it actually has a massive impact on spelling. So for example, if I was to write the word butter, for example, and I was putting that sound on as I was trying to spell the word, I'd be thinking, oh, how do I spell butter? Butter, two letters. And in my head, I would think that that was exactly right, because that would have crept onto those words. Otherwise, by saying these in a purer way, butter, it helps to be able to get more accuracy in spelling. And again, it sort of helps with the reading too. So let's have a go. If you're not sure of any of these, like I said, k and were are ingrained in my head. I tried to think of something that begins with that sound. So when I think of carrot, I don't think carrot, I think carrot, or cake. It's not cake. Same with W. I would think of window, wet, went. It's more of a w sound, which in my head feels completely wrong. But we'll have a go. So my turn, your turn. Ah. I. D. G, O, K, 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 E, A, B, L, S, J, X, Y, Z, G, A, E, I, O, U, or sometimes like in book or look. R, or, ow, oi, and your. Sometimes these might depend on accent. So, for example, you might have some children that say book and Luke. That might be the difference with something there. Sometimes you might have some children whose home language makes it trickier for them to say things. So for Gujarati speakers, sometimes the v sound can also be harder. So and sometimes you might be reading with some a reader who's perhaps got speech sound difficulties. You know, maybe they find it hard to say some of these sounds. I taught a little girl called Connie once, who's she's called herself Tony because she couldn't say the sound. This doesn't mean to say that they're going to not be readers or that we can't help them, but it's just something that you might want to be aware of when you're doing this. Again, we're not expecting you to be perfect, and in this space of time, we're not expecting you to know this exactly. If you're not sure about any of those, you can always pop a question in the chat and we can maybe try and help out with that. Other things that you might come across in the yellow and blue books, then, this is where longer words are introduced. So if you've ever watched Countdown, it always reminds me of that a little bit. So we've got CVCC words, CCVC words, and CCVCC words. So they're just longer words. So consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant word, gasp, gasp, or consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, step, step, or consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, flask. Often children struggle with these words. They find them quite tricky because often some of the quieter consonants like p or t, they're very quiet and they can get lost in the word. So that might be something, if you're reading yellow and blue books with your children on the platform, that might also be something to look out for. Also, then, if you're reading with year ones, this is where it starts to get quite, this is where we can start to think, wow, what actually we're teaching them to read and spell with is actually immense. As we just practiced there, we started with all of the reception letter sound correspondences. And although that's a reception expectation, it's likely that you've still got year 1 and 2 children that are still reading at that stage. But what you can see here this is one of the phonics programs that schools follow. You can see those letter sound correspondences, those foundational ones that we've just practiced. They're all along the first row of each of these columns. Underneath that are all the other additional ways that sound, that spoken sound, can be represented. And there's lots and lots and lots of them. And usually during year 1 and year 2, the national curriculum explains that schools need to be teaching those too. So when you get beyond those blue books, these are the kinds of patterns that children are going to be learning in school, and that's going to be able to help them. So in those green books and beyond, these are the kind of patterns. And when we think about, let me just pop back a second. When we look at these, there's many, many digraphs and many, many trigraphs that you can see. Also, though, there's these here that have got a line between them. They're called split digraphs. So that's where you've got 2 letters that are split and with a letter in the middle. Some of us, when we were at school, might have learned this as magic E. That's what it used to be called back in the day. So for example, I might learn that IE together makes an I sound. So I might have a really good understanding of that. So in words like tie or pie or lie, I and E together, easy. It's a digraph. I've learned an I making an I, an E, making an E. I've learned that together they make an I, and it's usually at the end of a word. Once we've done that, we teach this split digraph, which is where the I and the E get split with a letter squished in the middle, like in bike or like or time, those kinds of words. The same with the word home. You know, you can see the O and the E is split to make an O sound in there. If they were together, they'd still make an O sound, like in toe. So that's what a split digraph is. And there's loads and loads and loads of words that have got those in. So if you're reading green books or orange books with your children, they're likely to come up against loads of those. They're really common, and they're a key part of learning in year 1 and year 2. Also, they're going to be learning different spellings and different ways of saying sounds. So during year 1, this is a classic piece of learning. So they might be learning that the ear sound might look very different. So there might be E-E-R, like in cheer, or they might say A-R-E, like air in hair, or A-E-I-G-H, making the A sound. So all of those different combinations are what children are mastering for reading and spelling when they're in year 1 and year 2. And I'm just going to pause there because that's a ton of information. Becky, has anybody got any questions?
Hi everyone. We've just had one question, which was about regional and other accents, which you covered. I know, Emma, you did talk. Perhaps you'd like to
and it can be really, really tricky. Yeah, it depends, you know, different places in the country. That's not to say that children aren't very tuned in to being able to work that out. So, for example, they watch Strictly, don't they? And they still understand Tess and Claudia. They say the same words, they just say them in a very different way. So I think that's important for us to remember, that it can feel like a barrier, but children are actually very good at that. I think maybe for us as people reading with them, we just need to be aware of how they talk, and that, you know, for example, I would say path and grass because of where I was born and where I grew up. My nieces who live in Kent would say path and grass, just because, you know, also that's where they've grown up. So I think it's important just to bear it in mind that these, again, might be little things that might occur to you when you're reading one-to-one. Any more questions, Becky?
Just Lynn adding there, so we shouldn't be correcting them to BBC English.
No.
So, no, absolutely not, Lynn.
Not at all. No, not at all.
Yeah. And
thank you, because that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody was asking if it would be possible to have access to this video again, because we, as you know, we're recording it, and absolutely, yes, it will be. In fact, we recorded an earlier version of this session that Emma did at the beginning of the month, and that is already available to you on the knowledge base and via the website. But so go back through your emails, you'll find a link to that, and there will be other information coming from us too. But that's it, I think, for the questions.
Right, I'll pop on. So we've just had a whistle-stop tour about the complexities of the alphabetic code, but although that is the bit which is the most obvious bit, so learning the letters and how they match to the spoken sounds that we say, the other part is just as crucial. And that's what we do with those letters once we know them. I think it can be really easy to think, oh, these children, they know all these letter sound correspondences, how brilliant for them. But if they can't put them together at the point of reading, and that's the point where you come to with the children, then they're going to find it very hard. And in the process for reading, it's called blending. It's taking each of those separate spoken sounds and putting them together. So, you know, this is a little game that you could use you could start your session with the children, particularly if they're at that kind of pink, magenta, red kind of level, and you've got a book that's got quite good pictures in it. You know, you could have a little go at this game, because it really helps them to hear all those separate sounds and helps them to put them all in the right order. We call this oral blending. We would tend to do this in a nursery class or at the beginning of reception to get children's ears used to hearing those separate sounds in words before we start to complicate it by adding the letters in. So we could just play it like this. So I could say, I hear with my little ear something which sounds like dog. Dog. I hear with my little ear something which sounds like e. Tree. I hear with my little ear something which sounds like bin. If I was thinking that I'd got somebody who was reading maybe longer books or harder books, or remember those yellow or blue books with those consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant words, I might say, I hear with my little ear something that sounds like bench, to make it a little bit trickier. So that's where we start with all of this process. At the same point as learning those letter sound correspondences, we start just doing it through talking. And then we start to introduce this process of blending, and we start doing it by just putting these letter sound correspondences together that we know. So remember, we're only ever doing it with the sounds that we know. So in those pink books, it might look like in, or in, pin. Or in a magenta book where we're starting to introduce the digraphs, it might look like chin. Or in the red books where we've got some digraphs and some trigraphs, light. Or in the yellow books where we're starting to go same sound but just longer words, 2-syllable words like air, hair, clip, hair clip. And then as we go into those blue and green and orange books, we're starting to look at those alternatives. Remember, there we've got the I sound, remember, in I, pie, but also the split digraph that we were just talking about, time. And then also, children go through this process of learning that an I on its own isn't just an I, it can also say its letter name. So old child, and sky. So that's what it would look, depending on what colour book you have been allocated to match with your child, that's what blending might look like for them. And this is something that you can try if you've got somebody who's maybe struggling. This is what all of the phonics programs kind of follow, a process of I do it, we do it, you do it. So you'll watch me do it, we'll do it together, and now you have a go on your own. So it's a really, really I do, we do, you do methodology. It's really, really helpful. So if you get a child who's really struggling just generally with all of it, or if they're struggling with one particular word, you can use this as a really, really super simple strategy that you can use. So imagine we've got a book and it says, I got a big cat. So this would most likely be like a pink or maybe a magenta book. And I've got the words there that they would just have to know. So the capital letter I, making for the pronoun I, but then the rest of it, they can sound out or blend. So assuming that every book that the children are allocated, they know all of the letter sound correspondences. So an I do, we do, you do methodology might look like this. I do, got. We do, got. You do. And then we'd go back to the beginning of the sentence and do it, both of those words. So my turn, I got. Our turn, I got. Your turn. And then I would read it, ah. Then we would read it, ah. Then you would read it. Then I would read back to the beginning, read up to the ah. So I got ah. Now we would read it together. I got ah. And then you would read it on your own. And then the next word I would blend. So my turn, big, together. Big, your turn. Then we'll go back to the beginning again. So my turn, I got at big. Our turn, I got at big. Your turn. And then my turn, at cat. Our turn, your turn. And together, I got at big cat. So you can see there now, this way of working can be restrictive. If you've got some children that are perhaps reading a yellow or a blue or a green, this might only be to help them get beyond words that they're particularly struggling with. This as a process is definitely one that would help your pink and magenta readers, definitely, especially if they're feeling a bit anxious or they find it hard. So you can do it with longer sentences. We can try that, but basically it's about putting those sounds together, squishing them together, blending them together to be able to read whole words. And these words here that are in green, they are known sometimes as tricky words or high frequency words, common exception words, or sight words even. Now, often the words that phonics programs and schools, that if you've got your own children, you might find them coming home in their book bag. They're just words kind of that don't follow a kind of a phonicsy pattern. You can't really sound them out. So it's really useful for us, if we to be aware of those in the books too, because I know that the way that the books on the platform were organised, they're organised in a very sequential way. So those green words, those tricky words or high frequency words, those words there, they're really highly occurring in language. They often have very little meaning on their own, like all. What does that mean on its own? It's not the same as a ball, which is an actual thing. So the children not only are having to learn words that don't have any apparent meaning, but they also are having to learn them without spelling. They've got to just have a good visual memory for those words. So it's a good idea to maybe think about what, if we've got some children that might be struggling with those, and how we could perhaps perhaps help them. So just to give you a bit of an idea about what this would look like on the platform, this would be like a pink sentence, because it's just got those single CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant words. So really basic sentences, single letter sound correspondences, moving towards words and sentences that have got digraphs. So that would look more towards moving into a kind of a magenta kind of red kind of realm of book. So you would start to see that, and this is where they would start to be saying things like sing. They might get the digraphs, they might not see those as whole units. Then also once they get into the yellow and blue, but I think this would be more like a yellow book really. They've got the digraphs, but they've also got longer words like sports. So some consonant, vowel, consonant words, but also a lot more of these high frequency words. So you can see how these sentences build up over time. And then once you get into like the blue and the green books, you can start to see how they represent the same spoken sound in lots and lots of different ways. So we've got the split digraph, these there, and then we've got the E there, green there, and the E on its own making it sound, so me. So really, with blending, it just takes lots and lots of practice, which is exactly what you are so brilliant at doing with our young readers, is you are providing them that opportunity to practice. And that I do, we do, you do methodology, when you come up against words that they are either struggling with or to do together, or if you just, if you're trying to build their confidence, when we come to the reluctant and shy readers session next week, we're going to talk some more about how to help with that. But like that is a strategy that we use all the time in school, and it's super, super, super helpful. Okay, any more questions, Becky?
No, there aren't, so we can move on.
Brilliant. Right.
Yep.
Okay, I think now it's time to look inside the Chapter 1 platform. Emma, is there anything that I've been talking about that you would add to?
No, I don't think so, Emma. As always, you did a brilliant job. I think the only thing I would say on the subject of sight words and tricky words is that we have those, for those of you who've started your reading sessions already or have done your training, we spend quite a bit of time in the flashcards part of the platform, giving you an opportunity with those flashcards to practice those tricky high frequency words. So the flashcards that come up will often be a combination of words that children can decode, but will also include quite often those words so that you can you know, they are words that children just have to learn, as Emma said, because they're not amenable to being to blended or sounding out. Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen now and just give you a little bit of a flavour of the platform and some of the sort of bring to life a little bit some of the things that Emma's been talking about. So what I've done here is I've got open a practice module in the platform. So all of you have the opportunity, if you've done your training, you'll know that we give you a chance to be able to have a practice reading session at any point, obviously, in your chapter 1 journey, but particularly helpful when you're just starting to understand how the platform works. And if you click on that practice reading session, you're able to see in any of the activities, which are down here on the left-hand side, so our panel of activities, the flashcards I've just talked about, which is where you might find those high-frequency tricky words. But certainly in the panel on stories, which is the one we're in now, you have an opportunity to see both the kind of adult version of the platform, which is this black and white and grey section in the main screen, and then also in a sort of little blue side panel, what the expectation is that your child will be seeing at their end. So obviously you're talking to them on the headset, but they are looking at something which is synced to what you're looking at, but their view is a little bit different. It's a more child-friendly view. So the kinds of stories that Emma was talking about, you reading with a very early reader in the original, in the sort of pink or magenta, you can see that the story level in this example at the moment is pink, might be something like this story, Nat the Cat. So you'll see, I'm going to expand this very briefly so that you can see that what the child is seeing is a kind of simpler version of the text with a nice picture of Nat there, and Nat is a cat, Nat is a fat cat. So the techniques that you might want to do with your reader are the kinds of things that Emma's shared today, sort of building up those sentences. And the thing to remember is that although your children will all be in year 1 and year 2 and sometimes even year 3, they've been chosen for this programme because they are behind the expected level for their year group. So that's why a number of them will still be working at what Emma talked about as the reception level. They've come to year 1 with their skills not quite where they should be, and that's where, you know, your practice and your support of them is going to be so crucial. So that's a very basic text. I'm going to give you one sort of example of a slightly higher text so you can see the contrast. So I'm going to pick a green text now, so just change that reading level. And that will bring up for me a range of green stories. And there's one here called The Reading Spot, which feels very apt, given that we're talking about reading. And it's a story, in fact, that's a relatively new text in the platform, one of the ones that Emma helped us make sure was suitable for children in terms of the progression of their phonics. So you can immediately see with this text that, you know, there's some dialogue, there are some of those longer words like teacher, where there's a range of digraphs in there and alternative pronunciations for particular versions of those digraphs. And there's also an expectation that children will understand some punctuation, they might be able to put some expression into their reading. And those are all the things that we're really hoping that you're going to be able to encourage, so that helping them with their decoding, of course, but developing that blending, the automaticity that Emma talked about being so important. So a couple of other quick features to mention, which are, you know, not specifically phonics related, but are really important in terms of working in with and encouraging your child, is first of all the kind of high five option that's down here that you might have seen. You can send a little congratulations, this animated little dog saying well done when a child has really tried their best. And remember, of course, that we are always praising the effort rather than the outcome. So it's, you know, you're wanting to praise the process rather than whether they've got everything perfectly right. And then there's also an opportunity to use the little, what we call the owl mechanism here. So you might want to send a little message to your student, and that could be a sort of well done message, but it could also be just taking a little bit of a word part and putting it into the chat, so that you into the message student box, so that the owl delivers it, and then you could talk about that specific digraph. Remember too, that if you want to highlight words as you go through, you can do that on your end, and they will appear. You can see the highlights showing on the child's end in that little practice screen there too. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability for you to highlight individual digraphs or phonemes in a specific word. So you do have to highlight the whole word, but at least they will help you isolate something and work on it together if it's proving to be a particular issue for your child. And then last but not least, in order to mention, I'm going to just move out of the practice session and just remind you all of a couple of things on the main menu. So first of all, in the profile area, you will be able to see the year group of your child if you want to know that, and it will always tell you the reading level that you or the teacher have set, and the activity level that they're working on as well. And then in our knowledge base, not only do we have all the training that you did when you signed up to be a reader at the top there, but we also have a library of specific segments. So we talk about the reading levels. We've got a segment on stories and activities. We have, as Becky mentioned, a recording here of Emma's first session on phonics, which is already up there. And we also have over on the right-hand side here a number of different PDF resources about phonics. So there's a glossary of terms to remind you about this technical vocabulary and what it all means. There's a PDF which tries to summarize phonics just on one page, but has some great links to some videos of the kind that Emma mentioned, including, in fact, a link to Emma's own site where she does quite a lot of pronunciation practice on some of the sounds that children learn in year one, particularly the phase 5 sounds as they're known. So I would encourage you to have a look at those and learn a bit more about phonics and how it approaches our platform. So I'll stop there, but obviously open to any questions, Becky, if we've had any more, or Emma, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what I've said as well.
No, I think that's perfect. And I suppose it's just reiterating really that, you know, there is no expectation that you are an expert in this. You're giving the children lots of extra practice, and it's the practice that they need. Usually it's not the recognizing the letter sound correspondences that they find hard. It's the blending process that they find really hard. And it's sometimes remembering that when they get to the end of the sentence, the words that they've already read in that sentence, which is why they're going back to the beginning of the sentence and reading every time you've introduced a new word, can be helpful if they are bit like that, if that's something that they're struggling with.
There was just Duncan was asking for some advice on how to go over maybe a longer word which has got multiple digraphs in it, you know, 2 or 3 perhaps. How would you break that down and work with them? Yeah, so I suppose it's thinking about, do they know each of the digraphs that are in the word? So in that word teacher that Emma just showed us, do they know the EA making an E? And do they know the ER making the Do they know that? So, you know, just breaking those bits down, and then maybe thinking about doing it a bit at a time. You know, some of the problem with our, you know, children that struggle is because they feel a bit overwhelmed by just like the look of a word. It might be that they know all of the letters and the sounds in that word, but they just might be like put off by the size of it. And I always remember being like a year 1 or a year 2, or maybe even a year 3, like trying to learn that word, because really hard, particularly for spelling when you're that age. And, you know, like it just feels like you're never going to be able to learn how to spell it because it feels so hard. So for a word like teacher, I would be thinking about E, fine, we can do that. So the ch is also a digraph, isn't it? So there's like 3 in there in that word. So you could think about how to break it up into little chunks. T, E, ch,
you can think about doing it in that way. I feel like because you're on there, because of using the platform, using the owl in that way might be helpful. But also think about, you know, just think about how you can use that I do, we do, you do. My turn, each, our turn, each, your turn, each. It's just tricky because often they're at that stage where they're really struggling, particularly when they're reading a sentence. There's so much going on in their brain. They often default to E and an A, for example, being so they might be going to rather than E. So it's just maybe thinking about it. If you've got somebody who struggles with recognizing those digraphs, just before you even start the reading part, just go through on this page. Here are some of the digraphs. Do you know this one? Do you know this one? Do you know this one? And then when they get to the words, it's not, you know, let's not read. It's a lot less overwhelming when they get to the words in the sentences. I think that maybe would be how I'd go about it. I don't know if that answers the question.
That's excellent to me. That's great. Yeah, and there haven't been any other questions coming through. I don't know if we'll give people a moment to think. We're already, 4 minutes to 10:30.
Usually for us, we're coming in on time.
We're coming in on time, and I'm so impressed. We're getting better with practice. You see, it's a meta commentary on all of the excellent practice you're going to be giving with children. As it turns out that practice definitely makes progress. Yes, we no longer say practice makes perfect, because it's not perfection that anyone's aiming for, it's just progress. So thank you all very much for your questions and for being here today. If there's no final questions, we'll give you the last few minutes back on your Monday morning. Do let us know if you've got any feedback in the chat, anything that you'd like to see us do differently in the future. And if you are able to join Emma for the Reluctant Readers session or the Building Confident Readers session that we're doing in the future, please do. Although, of course, we will be both putting them in the knowledge base and circulating. We do a kind of once a month email to all of our volunteers saying, these are the sessions that are upcoming and these are the recordings that you can access. So watch out for that as well. And best of luck with your reading. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.